The house goes to your brother. You knew that. My father said it while chewing his steak, like he hadn't just confirmed that the $45,000 I'd spent renovating their crumbling home meant nothing. My mother nodded along, avoiding my eyes. My brother Derek smirked across the table, already calculating the property value. But what none of them expected was the manila folder I'd brought to dinner, or the legal document inside that was about to turn their inheritance plan into rubble. Before I show you what was in that folder, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? And when you hear how this family dinner ended, tell me honestly, would you have protected yourself the same way? My name is Adrian. I'm 32 years old, and I've spent my entire life being the responsible one in a family that only rewarded recklessness. Growing up in our small town outside of Pittsburgh meant growing up in Derek's shadow. He was 3 years older, louder, more charming, and infinitely more destructive. While I was earning scholarships and working part-time jobs, Derek was crashing cars our parents replaced, failing classes they paid tutors to fix, and burning through opportunities like they grew on trees. The pattern was always the same. Derek would mess up. Our parents would bail him out. I would watch silently, knowing that asking for anything myself would be met with lectures about responsibility and self-sufficiency. The rules were different for us. They always had been. Derek needs more support, Mom would say whenever I questioned the disparity. You've always been so capable, Adrian. You don't need us the way he does. Translation: Derek's failures required funding. My successes required nothing. I put myself through college, then through law school. I passed the bar on my first attempt. I joined a small firm specializing in real estate law, and I built a career brick by brick while Derek bounced between get-rich-quick schemes and girlfriends who inevitably discovered his credit score. By the time I was 30, I'd saved enough to buy my own condo. Derek, at 33, was living in our parents' basement, working on a startup that existed primarily as a pitch deck and a dream. Then the ceiling collapsed. Not metaphorically. Literally. A pipe burst in my parents' attic during a February freeze, bringing down half the second-floor ceiling and revealing decades of deferred maintenance. The contractor's estimate was devastating. $60,000 minimum to make the house livable again. Insurance covered $15,000. My parents had maybe $8,000 in savings. We'll have to sell, Dad said during a family meeting, his voice hollow. The house isn't worth what we owe on it, not in this condition. We'll be lucky to break even. Mom was crying. Derek was staring at his phone. And I was doing mental math, calculating whether I could help without destroying my own financial security. How much do you need? I heard myself ask. Dad looked at me with something like hope. If we had another $45,000, we could fix everything. The roof, the plumbing, the electrical. Make it solid for another 30 years. $45,000. My entire emergency fund plus half my investment portfolio. I can do it, I said. But I want it documented. A formal loan agreement. Dad's expression flickered. A loan agreement? Adrian, we're family. Family doesn't mean we can't be professional about this. I'm offering to save your home. I just want paperwork showing that the money is a loan, secured against the property. Standard stuff. I do these documents every day at work. That seems excessive, Mom said carefully. It's not like we're going to run off with the money. Derek finally looked up from his phone. Yeah, sis. Don't you trust your own parents? I looked at my brother. The brother who'd borrowed $3,000 from me 6 years ago and never mentioned it again. The brother who crashed my car when I was 19 and let our parents convince me not to report it to insurance. The brother who'd never once said thank you for anything. I trust everyone, I said evenly. I just believe in documentation. The argument lasted 2 hours. Dad called me paranoid. Mom said I was making things complicated. Derek accused me of treating them like strangers. But in the end, they needed the money more than they needed to win the argument. Dad signed the promissory note. Mom signed as witness. What I didn't tell them was that I'd also prepared a mechanic's lien. In Pennsylvania, if you pay for significant improvements to a property and don't get repaid, you can file a lien that attaches to the property itself. I didn't file it immediately. I hoped I wouldn't have to. But I prepared it, notarized it, and locked it in my safe deposit box. Just in case. The renovation took 4 months. I managed the contractors, negotiated with suppliers, spent weekends overseeing work while Dad watched football and Derek disappeared for days at a time. Mom thanked me occasionally, but Dad seemed almost resentful of my involvement, like my competence was a personal insult. When it was done, the house was transformed. New roof, updated plumbing, modern electrical, refinished floors. The property value had probably increased by $80,000. My parents had a safe, beautiful home. And I had a promissory note that I assumed would eventually be honored. 2 years passed. I never mentioned repayment. My parents never offered. I told myself it was fine, that the money would come back eventually, maybe through inheritance, maybe through some future acknowledgement of what I'd done. Then came the dinner. It started normally enough. Sunday pot roast at my parents' house, a tradition I'd maintained even when Derek couldn't be bothered to show up. But that night, Derek was there. So was his new girlfriend, a woman named Christy who laughed too loud and looked around the house like she was appraising it. "We have an announcement," Derek said over dessert, grinning at Christy. "We're engaged." Mom gasped with joy. Dad clapped Derek on the shoulder. I offered congratulations and tried not to think about how Derek's last 3 relationships had ended in restraining orders or bankruptcy filings. "And," Derek continued, "we've been talking about the future. About starting a family. And Mom and Dad have agreed to sign the house over to us early. As a wedding gift." The room went quiet. Or maybe the roaring in my ears just drowned everything out. "What?" My voice came out strangled. Dad shrugged, cutting into his pie. "The house goes to Derek. You knew that. It's always been the plan. Your mother and I will stay in the guest suite until we don't need to anymore. Derek and Christy will take over the main house, raise their kids here. Keep it in the family. I put $45,000 into this house," I said slowly. "Money that was supposed to be repaid. Consider it your contribution to the family," Dad replied. "Derek will need all the help he can get starting out. You're doing fine on your own. You always have been." Mom reached over to pat my hand. "It's not like you need the money, sweetheart. You're so successful. This is about giving Derek a foundation." Derek wasn't even looking at me. He was showing Christy something on his phone, probably Pinterest boards for the nursery he was planning in the room that used to be mine. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something calmer. Something I'd learned from years of reviewing contracts and finding the clause that protected my clients. "Okay," I said quietly. Dad blinked, surprised by my easy acceptance. "Okay? I understand." I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila folder I'd brought. "But before you sign anything over to Derek, you should probably see this." I slid the document across the table. Dad picked it up, frowning. "What is this?" "It's a mechanic's lien. I filed it last month with the county recorder's office." I kept my voice pleasant, professional, the same tone I used with difficult clients. "It attaches to the property itself. What it means is that the house cannot be sold, transferred, or refinanced until my $45,000, plus interest at the legal rate, is paid in full." The color drained from Dad's face. Derek grabbed the document. His hands were shaking as he scanned the legal language. "What the hell is a lien?" "It's a legal claim against property," I explained calmly. "Because I paid for improvements and wasn't repaid according to our agreement, I have the right to secure my investment. If you try to transfer the deed to Derek without satisfying the lien first, the title company will flag it. The transfer won't go through." "You can't do this," Mom whispered. "We're your family. Family honors their agreements." I met her eyes. "You signed a promissory note. You agreed to repay me. Instead, you decided to give my investment to Derek as a wedding present." I paused. "Did you really think I wouldn't protect myself?" "This is insane," Derek sputtered. "Dad, tell her she can't do this." Dad was still staring at the lien document, his face gray. Is this legal?" "Completely legal. I'm a real estate attorney, Dad. This is literally what I do for a living. Did you think I wouldn't know how to protect a $45,000 investment?" I took a sip of water. "The lien is valid for 5 years. After that, I can foreclose if necessary. But I don't want to do that. I just want what I'm owed." Christy looked between Derek and my parents, confusion evident on her face. "Wait, so we can't get the house?" "Not until someone pays me $47,812, I said. "That's the principal plus 2 years of interest at 6%. Very reasonable, actually. Market rate for personal loans is much higher." "We don't have that kind of money," Mom said, her voice breaking. "Then the house stays in your name, the lien stays attached, and Derek doesn't get his wedding present." I stood up, gathering my coat. "I'm not trying to destroy the family. I'm trying to be treated fairly. You have options. You can pay me back. You can take out a home equity loan to pay me back. Or you can wait until you actually sell the house, at which point my lien gets satisfied from the proceeds before anyone else sees a dime." Derek stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "You selfish." "Careful." My voice went cold. "I've been called worse by better attorneys than you'll ever be able to afford. And unlike them, I have documentation for everything." I looked at my parents. "You raised me to be responsible. To work hard. To earn what I have. You just didn't expect me to apply those lessons when it was inconvenient for you." I walked to the door, then paused. "One more thing. The promissory note you signed? It has a clause about legal fees." If I have to sue to enforce my lien, you pay my attorney costs too. So I'd suggest we resolve this before it gets more expensive. I opened the door. Thanks for dinner. The pot roast was excellent. 3 weeks of silence followed. Then Dad called, his voice tired and defeated. They'd taken out a home equity loan. $47,812 was wired to my account the next day. I filed a lien release with the county recorder's office and sent my parents a copy. The house transfer to Derek went through a month later. I wasn't invited to the celebration dinner. I wasn't invited to the wedding either, which happened 6 months after that. I didn't mind. What I did mind was the phone call I got 8 months after Derek took ownership. It was Mom, crying so hard I could barely understand her. Derek and Christy had taken out a second mortgage to fund one of Derek's startup ideas. The idea had failed. The bank was foreclosing. They were about to lose the house entirely, including the guest suite where my parents lived. Can you help? Mom sobbed. Can you do something? You're a lawyer. There must be something you can do. I sat in my quiet condo, looking at the walls I'd painted myself, the furniture I'd saved for, the life I'd built with no one's help. I'm sorry, Mom, I said finally. I really am. But you made your choice about who deserved the house. Now Derek's choices have consequences. I can recommend a good bankruptcy attorney if you want. I hung up before she could respond. 6 months later, the house sold at auction. My parents moved into a small apartment in a senior community. Derek and Christy divorced shortly after, and last I heard, he was back to living in someone's basement, working on another startup that would definitely be different this time. Dad called me once, about a year after they lost the house. He didn't apologize exactly. But he said something that surprised me. You were right to protect yourself. I should have taught your brother to do the same instead of always catching him when he fell. It wasn't an apology. But it was an acknowledgement. And from my father, that was almost more meaningful. I visit them now, at their apartment. We don't talk about the house. We don't talk about Derek much either, though I know he still calls them for money they don't have. We talk about small things. The weather. Their neighbors. My case is at work. It's not the family I wanted. But it's the family I've learned to accept. If you're watching this and you've ever been the responsible one in an irresponsible family, I want you to hear something important. Protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. The same people who call you heartless for having boundaries are the same people who would drain you dry without a second thought. You are allowed to love your family and still refuse to be their sacrifice. Document everything. Trust nothing. And never assume that fairness will be given to you just because you've earned it. Sometimes you have to file your own lien on life. And sometimes, that's the only thing that saves you. If this story spoke to you, drop a comment below. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.